Chapter 2398 Backstab 1. Zhang Yi glanced at Hela, then looked at Odin and Loki. Then you get out of the way. I'll take care of them first. Odin and Loki continued their attacks on Zhang Yi, but faced with that enormous, all-encompassing being, their efforts were like those of clowns, utterly meaningless. Please don't kill them. Hela's voice carried an unusual plea. Odin and Loki, they are only corrupted. There is still a chance to save them. If you intervene, it will be utter annihilation. Zhang Yi's eyes were cold, and he didn't take Hela's words to heart at all. He raised his right hand and flicked his fingertips lightly. Puffed, puffed. Odin and Loki's bodies silently began to split in the middle, with one crack at first, then 10, then 100. Finally, they turned into countless fragments, exploding directly in midair. Zhang Yi's myriad phenomena expanded, directly drawing them into the other dimensional space. Hela's eyes were filled with despair, but she was helpless. Zhang Yi had spared her life, which was already a stroke of luck for her. The wisest course of action right now is to eliminate Odin and Loki, who have already been corrupted. Is there a chance to awaken them? Sorry, Zhang Yi has no interest in that right now. He's not very familiar with these two people, so it's easier to just kill them directly. Passing by the stunned and numb Hela, Zhang Yi teleported directly to Morgan's side. Morgan's breathing had become extremely heavy, and much of the armor made of banknotes and gold on his gleaming body had fallen off, leaving piles of gold on the ground. Zhang Yi had the urge to pick up the money, but after realizing that it was all a manifestation of his supernatural abilities, he restrained himself. The scorpion's death ray attack came again, a terrifyingly powerful crimson ray shooting from its tail. Zhang Yi simply raised his hand, and the door to all things in the universe opened. That extremely powerful beam of light, capable of devouring the life force of others, silently disappeared into the void. Leave the rest to me, Zhang Yi said calmly to Morgan. Morgan urgently injected himself with military-grade stimulants and treatments, and new flesh and blood grew back from his wounds at a visible rate. Please. Morgan had no choice but to say that. Zhang Yi faced Kingxi directly. Kingxi stared at Zhang Yi, and the death ray was easily blocked by Zhang Yi, making Kingxi realize the danger. I've seen enough. I've basically figured out your abilities. First, it allows one to control puppets who have been mentally corrupted, turning them into their slaves. Second, fire a death ray that can plunder life. As long as it hits the opponent, it will extinguish their life force. The Radiant Moon Empire, a great general from 300 years ago, Remnant Scorpion. In these 300 years, your strength has improved only slightly, and your abilities have not changed much. As Zhang Yi spoke casually, he activated his ability. The second hand in the left eye predicts all of the opponent's movements within the next 5 seconds. In his right hand, the Sword of Judgment appeared instantly, merging with his divine forging, its icy blue blade igniting with endless dark light. A massive dark vortex formed behind him, as if opening the door to an inner universe. Then, viscous, dark antimatter flowed out from it, transforming into a huge, dark river capable of swallowing everything, covering Zhang Yi's sword. Dark realm, follow the flow. Zhang Yi casually swung his sword with his right hand, and a dark light curtain shot forward in a crescent shape like splashed ink. The entire world before them was swallowed up by a dark torrent. The terrifying sword energy, mixed with the power to rupture time and space, instantly arrived before the massive body of the scorpion. The terrifying killing intent caused Kingxi's crimson pupils to suddenly shrink. He sensed death approaching, let out a roar from his throat, and then raised his armored arms to shield himself. Boom! A crimson energy erupted from his body, forming a massive barrier that emerged beneath his feet and shot straight into the sky. The dark river, so silent yet incredibly violent, crashed directly into the distant sky. Roar! The roar of the scorpion echoed as the two forces annihilated each other. In just one exchange, Zhang Yi's dark realm flowing technique gained an absolute advantage. The crimson death light was constantly eroded, and soon 30% of the scorpion's defensive barrier was destroyed. But in the blink of an eye during this clash of forces, a chilling aura suddenly appeared from behind Zhang Yi. It was accompanied by a sudden, instantaneous burst of powerful killing intent. A long sword engulfed in black flames stabbed fiercely towards Zhang Yi's back. The long sword, burning with black flames, silently emerged from the void, stabbing towards Zhang Yi like a venomous snake. The blade hissed coldly, as if trying to pierce the boundary between light and shadow. Without turning his head, Zhang Yi's sixth sense, which was inherent to the second hand of time, had already made him aware that someone was about to launch a sneak attack. The myriad phenomena remained unfolded. 3,000 dimensional gates surrounded his body, and the spatial barrier, like a flowing curtain of water, swallowed the sword's edge, creating ripples like shattered mirrors. The flames burned and roared, but could only flicker between the cracks in the door before being completely extinguished. Zhang Yi lowered his eyelids and slowly turned his gaze to what was behind him. He clearly saw the guy who attacked him. The person who attacked him was none other than Daolon. Mourning the mist. Zhang Yi's voice was deep and cold, like ice striking steel. "Why did you attack me?" Zhang Yi wouldn't be surprised if anyone wanted to kill him. After all, on the moon, he was just an outsider. But if he shared the same goal as the two great empires, then what was the point of Daolon killing him? Zhang Yi had already sentenced Daolon to death in his heart, but he wanted to know the reason. Daolan's eyes gleamed with a dark light, her expression both ferocious and cold. He gripped the long sword, black flames still burning on its blade, as if trying to consume all reason. Daolan's voice was unusually calm, "Because your presence is superfluous. You shouldn't exist on this stage. You must die." A sharp glint flashed in Zhang Yi's eyes. He didn't act immediately, but stared at the other person, as if trying to see through Daolan's eyes. "The Dark Moon Empire's involvement is far more complicated than I imagined. I knew it. The collapse of the moon was not accidental, but a deliberate masterpiece. But unfortunately, my arrival has sealed the fate of your plans," Zhang Yi said coldly. He stood between two black bishop-level inhumans, as the attacks from Remnant Scorpion and Morning Storm came crashing down on him like a storm. Chapter 2399 Backstab 2. In the distance, Brian and Yang Xinshin were locked in combat with several Dark Apostles. These Dark Apostles are extremely powerful, and there are even several beings similar to Odin. Even with Brian and Yang Xinshin's strength, they need to be careful. After all, neither of them are superhuman skilled in combat. Both of them caught a glimpse of Zhang Yi's commotion out of the corner of their eyes, their expressions showing some surprise, but neither of them had any intention of coming over to help. Because they knew very well that Zhang Yi's strength was more than enough to easily deal with the rebellion before them. Inside Zhang Yi's shadow space, Fatty Sue and the others were observing the outside world through the illusion window. What the hell? Why did Daolon suddenly attack the boss? Fatty Sue stared wide-eyed, his face filled with disbelief. Could it be that he has been corrupted by darkness? Uncle Yu guessed in a low voice. However, they all seemed very relaxed about it and showed no concern for Zhang Yi whatsoever. They know better than anyone how powerful Zhang Yi is. They found Daolan's foolish behavior laughable. But he doesn't seem out of control. Zhou Ke frowned, her face full of confusion. What exactly is going on? The crowd discussed it amongst themselves, but no one could provide an answer. They felt a vague unease, as if some kind of conspiracy was about to unfold. Zhang Yi fought two opponents alone, and the battle seemed intense, but from beginning to end, he simply stood still in one place. The myriad phenomena of the universe were his perfect defense. Powerful energy attacks falling into it were like spring rain falling on a pond, creating faint ripples, but unable to stir up any waves. He coldly surveyed Daolon and Kinxia, who were attacking him, while the fingers of his left hand twitched slightly. But soon, another person appeared beside Daolon on the battlefield. Those were Daolan's companions, their eyes burning with crimson dark flames. He remained silent, only staring coldly at Zhang Yi, his killing intent palpable. Zhang Yi had never noticed this person's existence before. It seemed that he had secretly entered the Dark Sun Forest just to complete the assassination mission with Daolon. In other words, Zhang Yi alone now has to face 3 opponents of the Black Bishop level at the same time. Daolon swung her long sword, which was burning with black flames, the blade light cleaving through space, creating layers of afterimages, and slashed towards Zhang Yi's chest. The other person unleashed a wave of dark flames from the flank, like a raging tide from the abyss, threatening to engulf Zhang Yi. The scorpion's tail emitted a deadly ray capable of robbing away life, shooting towards all things in the universe. However, Zhang Yi simply raised his hand, and the 3,000-dimensional gates suddenly spun, as if countless star rings were slowly rotating. All the sword energy, flames, and death ray impacts were sucked into the gate, disappearing without a trace, like a mud ox sinking into the sea. This is the power of absolute defense. There is no one below me. As long as the energy does not exceed the threshold for absorption by the other dimension, it cannot cause any harm to it. Daolon frowned, but did not back down. Instead, she moved closer again. His body was engulfed in terrifying black flames. I refuse to believe that your defenses are truly impenetrable. He swept his sword fiercely, and flames surged forth like a raging torrent, attempting to tear apart Zhang Yi's defenses. Zhang Yi's gaze was cold and sharp, and his left hand, hanging at his side, moved slightly. The next moment, the string of space suddenly snapped, turning into an incomparably sharp cut that swept across the sky. Daolan's body trembled, and a deep wound appeared on her chest, exposing the bone, from which blood gushed out. This attack almost sliced his body in 2. However, as a Black Bishop level inhuman and a beast-type dragon form ability user, his defensive power was already extremely strong. Otherwise, this strike would have cut him in half. Snort. He let out a low roar, and black flames instantly covered his entire body, as if he were wearing a jet-black armor. He revealed his dragon form, holding a sharp blade in his dragon claws, and charged at Zhang Yi once again. The other person spread his arms, and blood flames condensed into a vortex, transforming into a huge chain that wrapped around Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi's eyes flashed like lightning, and without moving an inch, the eternal sword suddenly appeared in his right hand, its blade gleaming with a cold light. With a casual slash, sword energy shot out, shattering the void. The chain snapped instantly, and the blood flames vanished with a mournful cry. The sword light, still possessing its momentum, pierced straight through the opponent's chest. The man screamed in agony as blood mist exploded, and his body was torn to shreds on the spot. A Black Bishop-level being with an ability index as high as 40,000 points was instantly killed by Zhang Yi. The power to sever space itself is terrifying. Moreover, he had no chance to dodge because dimensional string decomposition is an instantaneous skill with no trajectory. Upon witnessing the death of the mysterious assassin, a flash of shock and anger crossed Dao Lan's eyes. That person was his friend of many years. He never expected him to die so easily. Dao Lan roared madly, and the black dragon opened its mouth wide, spewing out endless firestorms, madly pouring towards Zhang Yi, attempting to completely engulf him. At the same time, his dragon claws gripped the jet-black longsword, unleashing one fierce slash after another. No matter how dense his sword shadows were, no matter how raging the black flames were, Zhang Yi remained unmoved. The myriad phenomena of the universe are like an impregnable fortress, swallowing everything whole. A look of horror finally flashed in the eyes of the scorpion. His scorpion tail was raised high, and powerful alien energy erupted like a volcano, then condensed at the hook of the tail, and finally burst out as a beam of death light like a red pillar. The death ray shot fiercely towards all things in the universe, attempting to pierce through them in one fell swoop. However, they ultimately could not understand that, apart from causality and illusion attacks, all physical attacks would be greatly reduced against Zhang Yi. Attacks from bishops are almost ineffective against Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi stood still, absorbing all their attacks with his myriad forms. Then, she coldly uttered, "Is it over? You seem to be having a lot of fun, but now it's my turn." In the next instant, Zhang Yi's figure transformed into a streak of light, appearing in front of Dao Lan in a flash. With a single stroke of the eternal sword, the power of the dark realm's flowing force instantly transformed into a raging sword light, tearing apart the heavens. Space shattered, and the sword light, sharp and unparalleled, slashed down from shoulder to abdomen. Dao Lan's eyes widened, and blood mist spilled from her throat. Her lips trembled, as if she wanted to say something. Zhang Yi gave him no chance. The second sword struck, completely severing his life force. Blood gushed out, staining the scorched earth red. Dao Lan's figure was torn to pieces, crashing into the ground, gradually dissipating in the air. Dao Lan is dead. Zhang Yi had already seen through his abilities, so he stopped probing from a distance and went straight into close combat. Chapter 2400 Backstab 3. The dimensional gate is one way. It cannot be breached by external attacks. Therefore, Zhang Yi's sword strike was powerful enough to attack the Remnant Scorpion, but the Remnant Scorpion's attack could not reach Zhang Yi through the dimensional gate. With the Eternal Judgment Sword in Zhang Yi's hands, he displayed unparalleled swordsmanship. This is not some fancy sword dance, but a sharp and effective attack that is most useful for killing enemies on the battlefield. With the power of the Dark Realm flow, sword after sword struck, as if cutting melons and vegetables, the sword light like a sudden rainstorm covering the sky above the scorpion. The scorpion roared and fought back with all its might. However, even though his ability index was 3,000 points higher than Zhang Yi's, the difference in his understanding of his own abilities meant that the power of his death ray was insufficient to contend with the antimatter energy of the universe's origin. The battle lasted less than 3 minutes before the scorpion's body was finally cleaved into pieces by Zhang Yi's sharp sword. The battle ended cleanly and efficiently, and Zhang Yi casually stored the 3 portions of Black Bishop-level primal power into his alternate dimension. Morgan watched from afar with great envy. He was willing to exchange these 3 powerful primal forces for anything. But it's clear that Zhang Yi wouldn't make a deal with him. Everyone's ability index is about the same, so why is there such a big difference in combat power? Is this the power of having dual space-time attributes? That's right, the difference in ability is that huge. If in the past Zhang Yi was invincible in defense simply because of his spatial abilities, now his attack power has also been greatly enhanced. The guidance from Ling and the 2 spiritual exchanges with the giant Drucker were incredibly beneficial for Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi stood with his sword in hand, his clothes fluttering in the wind, his gaze cold and indifferent, as if what had just happened was nothing more than a trivial matter. The battlefield fell silent once more, with only the lingering stench of blood in the air reminding everyone that what had just happened was not a dream, but naked death and betrayal. With Zhang Yi having eliminated the 3 main enemies on the front lines, the battle was quickly coming to an end. Yang Xinxin, Brian, and Morgan led a group of elite Colombian warriors and quickly wiped out the remaining Dark Apostles. The battlefield in the Dark Sun Forest gradually quieted down. The air was still thick with the smell of blood and gunpowder, and wreckage and ashes were scattered across the desolate land. The massive body of the scorpion was gone. Only the shattered, black fragments sank into the sand and slowly vanished into nothingness. Dao Lan and the aura of the group of Dark Apostles completely dissipated, as if they had never existed. The entire battlefield fell into a deathly silence after Zhang Yi's single blow shattered it. Zhou Kuo and Yang Xia emerged from the shadows. Zhou Kuo first checked Zhang Yi's body and was relieved to find that he was as usual and had not lost a single hair. Zhang Yi took a small cake from Yang Xia's hand and put it in his mouth. All the negative physical reactions caused by the battle, even just the muscle strain from swinging the sword, quickly disappeared. Most importantly, his spirits lifted. Killing is not a pleasant thing. Murderous intent can erode a person's heart, so Zhang Yi once mentioned to Yang Xia that he would add ingredients that stimulate dopamine secretion to supernatural foods. Since we arrived here, the fighting has been non-stop. I don't know what kind of enemies we'll face next. I'm really worried. Yang Xie straightened Zhang Yi's battle armor and said with a worried expression, "There won't be any trouble." Zhang Yi, however, spoke with absolute certainty. "Hey, Zhang Yi, what's going on? It's like you're hiding something from us." Yang Xie stared at him with a hint of reproach. Zhang Yi shrugged and laughed. "You didn't ask me either." Yang Xie was speechless for a moment. "There's nothing particularly noteworthy to explain. It's just that we used Gao Changgong's abilities to deduce some possibilities." Zhang Yi said calmly. Yang Xie, Zhou Kuer, and the others heard these words and probably guessed what was going on, but before they could ask any more questions, Morgan and the others came over. The people of Colombia remained silent for a long time, completely shocked by the strength Zhang Yi had displayed. Morgan's body was still injured, his clothes were tattered, and there were charred marks on his chest left by the remnant scorpion's death beam. But his eyes were fixed on Zhang Yi. Chaos. His throat was dry, and his tone was complicated. "How exactly did you do that? You were able to completely crush a being of the remnant scorpion's level all by yourself, and why did Dao Lan suddenly betray you?" Zhang Yi lowered his eyes, his fingertips lightly brushing against the blade to wipe away the remaining dark aura. His voice was calm, yet it carried a chilling undertone. "Because I ruined someone's plans." Morgan frowned, a flood of questions welling up in his mind. He couldn't help but press, "Some people? Who are you referring to? The Vatican? Or?" Zhang Yi raised his eyes, his gaze as dark as an abyss. He didn't say it directly, but simply uttered, "You'll understand soon enough." Zhang Yi had done what needed to be done and was too lazy to explain. He figured things would become clear once King Arthur and Saladin returned. After all, they are allies of the pupil organization, so their relationship is even closer. As for these people in Colombia, Zhang Yi was still unwilling to reveal too much important information. Morgan was startled, but did not press the matter further. He suddenly realized that perhaps any further words would be futile in front of Zhang Yi. On the path of those with superpowers, their opponents have already gone far ahead of them. The people of Colombia looked at each other, their faces displaying complex emotions. It was a mix of shock, fear, and unease about the future. Zhang Yi stood with his sword in hand, gazing deeper into the dark sun forest. There, black mist churned, and layers of space appeared and disappeared, like a series of collapsed dimensional ruins stretching out. "Let's go. Let's keep moving." He said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried an undeniable power. Morgan gritted his teeth, leaning on a golden cane, and struggled to keep up. A rare emotion suddenly welled up in his heart. Next to Zhang Yi, no matter how hard he tried, it seemed he could never catch up with her pace. They continued forward, crossing the crumbling woodland. The darkness in the air grew stronger, and the sense of mental oppression became more pronounced. Even the most elite warriors in Colombia had to grit their teeth and inject themselves with drugs that boosted brain cell activity in order to resist the mind-eroding power. Soon after, a series of booming sounds came from ahead. The earth shook violently, branches and leaves rippled, and large shadows spread outwards like waves. Dear viewers, thanks for staying with me. We'll try to get you more updates. Please like and subscribe and share the video with your friends. Love you all.